Hi, good evening. So, I've been active at ZOA. I'm the co-president of Greater Philadelphia ZOA chapter for the last year and a half, and I've been pretty active in the pro-Israel community, as you heard from the introduction, for a long time. And I have been a letter writer and gone to rallies, and I always kind of thought in the back of my mind I'd like to write a book. And I had the opportunity because Jerry invited me to do so a couple years ago. And I jumped at it because Jerry's indefatigable. I love that SAT word because my kids were studying those words here. And he's relentless and he's fearless, and I respect him immensely, and he's extremely organized. So we decided to write this book. We have a local publisher here, and here is the book. This is the front cover of the book. It's Pressing Israel, Media Bias Exposed from A to Z. And just for you tonight, we have a special deal. The book is on Amazon, actually. And our local publisher, Steve Crane, who's also a member of ZOA and other organizations, has graciously offered to allow us to sell the book for $10. For $10 when we do these when we do these presentations, and we will sign the book as well. Whether it's worth more money or less at the end after we sell it and sign it, we don't know. But anyway, I hope you will consider purchasing the book and buy some for your children, your grandchildren also, because this is an issue which unfortunately does not stop. We had to stop writing the book sometime last year. It was published in October, just before the Second Gaza War, which I guess we couldn't predict, but we should have predicted to some extent. The media coverage in the second Gaza operation was not any better, really. Maybe marginally better, slightly, probably not really, than it was in the first Gaza War. All right, anyway, so what's the theme here that you've heard? If you forfeit the language, you forfeited our history. I'm going to say that again. By forfeiting the language, you forfeited our heritage and our history. Now, I can't talk about the whole book because it's a long book, and this is complex stuff, as I'd like to tell people. You have to have a lot of knowledge about the Middle East. It is complex. It is not so simple as saying we're right and they're not, because they use buzzwords. They, meaning Palestinian Arabs, they're excellent at their PR. Israel is not as good in PR, and the media does not help us for a lot of reasons, which I'll explain and you'll see later. So when you hear the words like occupation and Palestinians and East Jerusalem, to try to counter that, we don't really have just one word to say that. I mean, occupied territory, you can say, oh, no, it's not occupied, it's disputed territory. But again, you have to explain that. People don't want to hear that. You have to have some basic knowledge so you can understand the themes here, okay? So I want to talk about three background aspects, I should say, that Westerners need to know and to understand. And the first is going to be Israel's, as Jerry alluded to, Israel's indefensibility within the 1949 ceasefire lines. Second is the Arab-Israeli conflict, Jewish as well as Arab refugees. And the third aspect is the Middle East Christians' plight, which is hardly given any coverage at all, and it should be given a lot more coverage. So, the 1949 ceasefire lines. These are the lines at the end of the War of Independence, after 6 Arab armies attacked Israel after rejecting the UN partition plan November 29, 1947. Those are the Auschwitz lines that Abba Eban referred to. This is important information. Now, when they rejected the UN peace partition plan, and actually Jerry and I spoke on November 29th last year at the actual 65th anniversary of the partition plan to a group at Katz JCC in Cherry Hill, 170 people. It was a very important day. You know, you have to say, had the Arabs accepted the peace plan, they would have another state. They would have their state. It would be celebrating the 65th anniversary of the state of Palestine or whatever they were going to call it. But they didn't do that. They rejected it. And 6 Arab armies attacked it. Obviously, you know the history. They lost. Thank God Israel was successful. Now, I'm not going to be able to give you a whole history lesson right now. But this is the Palestine Mandate. Okay? At the end of World War I, when the Ottoman Empire broke up and the Turks lost, and the colonial powers, France and Britain, got to control land in the Middle East, and they drew lines in the sand and created these countries, these state countries. This is the land the Palestine Mandate was to be, from the Balfour Declaration, to be the homeland of the Jewish people. So, Britain controlled this, as we all know. In 1922, they lopped off 78% of it to the east, calling that Transjordan. And The remaining part, Western Palestine, was the area that they now designated as the Jewish area. Although that too was going to be divided in 1947. So the 47 UN partition plan, already they have their one state was created, an Arab state out of this land already, and then a second Arab state was now to be contemplated. Now remember, the Arabs had there's only one Jewish state, and there's already 22 Arab countries. So they were given from the colonial powers the expression of their own nationality through the colonial powers after World War I. Now, this is important to understand this history, the Palestine Mandate. So this section I call it Geography 101, Land for Peace, David versus Goliath. So this is the map, what kind of map that you see frequently in the media. It makes Israel look so large. And we only call it West Bank here just for illustrative purposes, because we really know it as Judea Samaria. And this is Gaza here. And who is really the David and who is the Goliath here? Okay, that's the media wants you to see, that they believe that these poor Palestinian Arabs, they're the ones who are very poor David, and Israel's this big galoot, bully, it's Goliath over here. Okay? Now, how big is Israel? Well, Israel is very tiny, as we all know, okay? And I have to, this map, you really have to see how small Israel is in relation to the rest of the Arab world over here. But here's another map here, okay? This is the map Jerry showed you before. This is really the map that we should be focusing in on. Because this is tiny Israel, the size of what? The state of New Jersey. About 8,000 square miles. That's it. The size of New Jersey, okay? There are 57 Muslim-dominated countries. 57. They comprise a little less than a third of all the countries in the United Nations, okay? All against tiny Israel. By the way, this is the only democracy in this entire area, too. How big is Israel really? Well, take a look. People really think that Israel is enormous because the media makes it seem like Israel is so big in relation to the United States. Well, look at here. It's tiny. Next to New York, Vermont, the New England states. This is just some of the geographical information that people forget or don't realize or don't know. Only 112-mile coastline, only 260 miles at its longest, 60 miles at its widest, and 3 to 9 miles at its narrowest points, which I'll show you and you've seen before. Now, what's significant about 3 to 9 miles? Well, obviously not defensible, but when George W. Bush was running as a candidate for president, frequently, and Israel got smart about this, the military, the IDF, Ariel Sharon, I believe, in 1999, the time when he was running, was the defense minister. Take the candidates up on a helicopter tour to see for themselves what Israel is and how big it is. And George W. was very unfamiliar. And they took him up in the helicopter, and Ariel Sharon showed him the points from the western portion of Judea Samaria, 9 miles wide, to the Mediterranean. And George W. said, we have driveways in Texas that are longer than this. Now, it's an interesting observation, isn't it? Okay? But it just shows you how small Israel really is. 1/19 the size of California, and Florida, we all know Florida, right? 7 times you can fit into Florida. That's how small it is. This is an important statistic. I probably should have highlighted it more. It's 1/625th or 1/6 of 1% of the size of the Arab world. That's how small it is. Let's talk about who David and Goliath really is. And if you count Iran, which is not an Arab country, but obviously a Muslim country, right there in the Middle East, the ratio is 650 to 1. So I showed you some of these countries. 22 hostile Arab Muslim states, 350 million Arab Muslims in these states, 56 Islamic countries. There are 1.4 billion Muslims in the world. Now, this number, 6.2 million Jews in Israel, for a regional population ratio of 56 to 1. That's who we're talking about here. 1.2 million Arabs living in Israel as full citizens. As we know, and the media doesn't want to tell you this, they have full voting rights, they have full minority rights, they have the rights to some of the top health care in the world. They sit on the Supreme Court, they vote. They have more rights in Israel than they do in virtually any Arab country. Free press, too. Now, this is a stat statistic. There are about 13.5 million Jews in the world today. Sadly, about 5 million fewer than in 1939 before the Holocaust. Still today, we haven't recovered. I sometimes ask people, how many Jews do you think there are in the world? And they'll say, oh, 50 million. We wish there were 50 million. So we're facing, and not only that, this 13.5 million, I read somewhere, that's like the margin of error of the population in China on any given day. I mean, just think about that. Now, again, these are some of the dimensions over here. And again, it's just showing how small this whole area is. Now, here's a map that was drawn by a gentleman named Mark Langfan, who we know from ZOA. This is not his full-time job, but he has drawn some tremendous maps to show how vulnerable Israel could be. And he's gone to Congress and show the vulnerabilities of Israel. And he allowed us to publish his map in the book and here. Jerry and I put this slide in here after the second Gaza operation, just to show you, again, the rocket ranges. This is Gaza over here. The rocket ranges of these Qassams and the Grad missiles. And they're right into the heart of, right into the heart of Israel's population centers. Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, almost up to Jerusalem now. They hit Ashkelon and Ashdod. This is what Israel has to contend with. This is another very important map. Again, media does not show you this. And unfortunately, people who want Israel to give back or give up on the West Bank, so to speak, okay, do not recognize or fail to understand that this area, and if you've all been to Israel, you know that these are the Judean hills. Sorry, okay? These are mountains. This is 2,000 and 3,000 feet promontories, okay? If this land is ever given back to, or given to, not even given back, it's given up, I should say. It's given up. These people who control this are going to be looking right down and should be able to shoot on Jerusalem, on Tel Aviv, on Ben Gurion Airport. This is what was going on for the 19 years that Israel had to live under fire. And the same goes true for the Golan Heights. So this is a topographical map. Again, very important you don't see this, okay? So we have to be very careful when people say, well, Israel should just give up and there'll just be peace because now they'll have their own state. Be very wary about that, because anybody who knows anything about military, and even just makes sense, you don't have to know anything about military strategy. You know that being on the high ground is vital for security. You've been to Israel, and you've taken the road from Tel Aviv up to Jerusalem. You know a lot of brave Jewish soldiers and civilian people died in the 48 war to keep this lifeline open. And you see the remnants there of these tanks and other equipment. Now, this is a map we added somewhat recently. You remember, and I have to step back a little bit, the Oslo Accords, which Jerry mentioned. Under the Oslo Accords, the Palestinian Arabs and Yasser Arafat, they signed these accords saying that there was going to be any kind of deal or settlement, it was going to be directly with Israel, not to go to the United Nations or anywhere else. And why did we put this in here? Well, because, as we know, despite the fact that President Obama warned Mahmoud Abbas not to, they went to the UN, the Palestinian Arabs, to gain recognition for a state. Well, when they did that, Prime Minister Netanyahu said, all right, you know what? It's going to have to be some consequences here. Now, this is the municipal map of Jerusalem, okay? This is what the city lines of Jerusalem are today. And this is the old city, okay? What's in yellow are Arab areas. What's in blue are generally Jewish areas, okay? Now, the old city sits right here in so-called Arab East Jerusalem. As Gary explained, it's not true. This is Ma'aleh Adumim, okay? This is not that far from Jerusalem, but it's an outlier from the municipal map. This area which I'm pointing to here is called E1. You might have heard the E1 settlement area. This is an area that Israel had always intended one day to build, okay? Netanyahu announced that Israel was now going to be building here as a consequence of the Palestinian Arabs going to the UN. Well, you hear the media and the outcry, and even from Ban Ki-moon, the Secretary General of the UN. This is going to cut off the Arabs' access to Jerusalem. It's going to cut off from the West Bank. They're going to have no ability to get through. You take a look at this map and you see where the yellow areas and where the blue areas are. You tell me if Israel just builds right in here, this becomes blue, it's not going to cut off any of their access. Not even close. Again, you have to understand this stuff. Not easy, but you have to have basic knowledge. Oops. Okay. My co-president is ZOA, Howard Katzoff. Goes to Israel pretty frequently. I took some of these pictures here. Just like in the city of Philadelphia and in any township, if you want to build, you got to get a permit. Unfortunately, Israel seems to be a little lax sometimes about Palestinian Arab building, and also for political reasons doesn't force them to tear some of these buildings down, which they should. But this is an example of an illegal building, just a little north of Jerusalem. That's what Howard said. And you know why it's illegal? See these black things over here? These are water tanks. They are illegally hoarding water. They're off the grid. Okay, and you see. Why am I going back? And you see all over the place. Okay, now let's talk about who Israel's peace partners are, who our friends want Israel to be forced to make peace with, deals with, okay? So this is the symbol of the PLO, Palestine Liberation Organization, the umbrella group of all the Palestinian Arab organizations. Yasser Arafat was the founder of the PLO. Mahmoud Abbas was one of the founders too. He's a successor now. And Fatah is the largest party within the PLO. And so look at these nice symbols over here. Arafat used to wear this on his sleeve all the time. Does this show that these people have any interest in a peaceful coexistence with the Jewish state of Israel? Hardly. I mean, look at this. Okay? Look at this one for Fatah. Pretty violent. And finally, Hamas, which is a Sunni organization. Hamas is the Islamic resistance movement. Okay? They are now in control of Gaza. They were elected. They have a charter, which we have in our book. Their charter calls not only for the destruction of Israel, which is also what the PLO's charter is and Fatah's charter, but it's genocidal. They are talking about killing Jews everywhere. That's the people that Israel has to be making peace with, right? Always hear you got to make peace with your enemies. This is the new the 48th anniversary of Fatah. They have a new logo. Look how peaceful that is with this dove here. And this is supposed to be Palestine, right? Okay. This is Israel's peace partner. Look at Fatah. Fatah is Mahmoud Abbas, and we can have 1,000 quotes of all these gentlemen, okay, on what they're saying about Israel. Don't order us to recognize a Jewish state. We won't accept it. And that's just one of hundreds of examples where they're not in any way being respectful of a Jewish state. Hezbollah. Hezbollah is a Shiite organization. They are mostly in Lebanon, okay? And look what they're saying, horrible things about Jews and Israelis. It's not just Israelis, it's Jews as well. And this is Hamas, this is Khania, just horrible things. I mean, Egypt's President Morsi, okay, he's from the Muslim Brotherhood. When it was revealed recently, these bloodsuckers who attacked the Palestinians, these warmongers, the descendants of apes and pigs, they have been fanning the flames of civil strife wherever they were throughout history. They are hostile by nature. I kind of like the descendants of apes and pigs. The Muslims, they believe that Abraham was their father as well. So how does that comport with the fact that we're descendants of apes and pigs? I guess does that go back to Abraham too? I don't know, but these are the kind of things that they're saying here. And here's Ahmadinejad. Look, he's got the peace symbol up there. He's a peaceful guy, right? He's the one who wants to wipe Israel off the map. And the supreme leader, Khamenei, Israel's a cancer, okay? Now, some of you know Dry Bones, the comic strip by Bernard Kirchen. Phenomenal. He's in the Jerusalem Post a lot. The old anti-Semitism, I like this. Jews kill babies, okay? They are demonic and evil. But the new anti-Semitism, because you can't be so overt these days, unless you're one of these groups like Hamas or the Iranians who have no trouble saying about these nasty things, the new anti-Semitism is the Jewish state kills babies. So to get out to mask your anti-Semitism, it's the Jews state that you're against, not Jewish people, okay? That's not how Alan Dershowitz has defined it, the law professor from Harvard, who is admittedly a liberal from the progressive side, but extremely pro-Israel. And he makes a very strong case. I've heard him, read his book. I think this is one of the best cartoons that we have here. The Case for Moral Clarity. This is an example of a double war crime. The so-called soldier of Palestine, the coward, hiding behind the baby carriage, okay? That's a war crime. Facing off against the Israeli soldier who's defending the vulnerable, the baby, okay? And he also knows, this soldier of Palestine, that the Israeli soldier is most likely not going to even shoot him because he might have collateral damage and kill the innocent child. It is a war crime. This is exactly what the Palestinian Arabs were doing in Gaza, hiding their weaponry, hiding behind mosques and schools and hospitals, and shooting off rockets there. That's what's going on here. This is a war crime, okay? Prime Minister Netanyahu said of his late father, the great historian, Professor Ben-Zion Netanyahu, when he turned 100 recently before he passed away, those who are unfamiliar with the past cannot understand the present, and those who cannot understand the present cannot see what lies ahead. That's what we're talking about here. You have to have basic knowledge here. Dr. Martin Luther King, when people criticize Zionists, they mean Jews, you're talking anti-Semitism. Let me talk briefly about the second issue, the Jewish refugees from Arab lands, that you're not hearing much about until very recently. I would say maybe certainly within the last 10 years, probably even less than that. The Israeli government is finally recognizing and coming to the fore that, hey, you know what? We were kicked out of a lot of these Arab lands as well. And we were living there for hundreds and hundreds of years. And Rabbi Gabbai, whose family is from Egypt, is a perfect prime example of this. But look at how many Jews were living in these Arab lands in North Africa. Hundreds of thousands before 1948. Iraq, Lebanon, Syria too. How many indigenous Jews were forced to flee Arab and other Muslim lands they lived in for these hundreds of years? The estimates are 800 to 850,000. That's how many we're talking about. Jews who were forcibly removed or forced to flee their homes or ancient homes and their businesses without being compensated at all. That's a different situation than many of the Arabs who fled tiny Israel during and before the War of Independence, where the estimates are 472 to 650,000. So this, first of all, it's going to be any kind of, the Arabs and Palestinians always call for the right of return. If there's going to be any refugee reconciliation, you have to take into consideration the Jews also, who were forced to flee, and all the billions of dollars of their businesses that were also confiscated. I found this statistic fascinating when doing research. Most of these Arabs who fled Israel, okay, the fledgling of never saw one Israeli soldier. Of course, we know they were told by their leaders to leave so that the invading Arab armies can come in and push the Jews into the sea, and then they'll get out of the way. It's been documented. The mayor of Haifa, Jew, pleaded with their Arabs to stay. Those who stayed have become citizens of Israel. Those who left are kept by the United Nations and by the Arab brethren in some of the squalid camps run by UNRWA. So it's very significant that we make sure that this gets part of the conversation to talk about these refugees as well. Okay. Now I'm going to talk about briefly about the Christians in peril in the Islamic Middle East. Because the only country that the Christians have been thriving and are growing in their population is where? Israel. And I showed you before, I'm going to show you where the Christians lived for all these years, okay? But I'm going to start here. The mainstream media has laid blame for the Holy Land's Christian troubles at Israel's feet. Of course, Israel. This is Bob Simon from 60 Minutes from last year. That's not the facts. Christians have had a history in the Middle East that is also at least as long as the Muslims, if not longer, obviously, since Islam wasn't founded until the 7th century. In Lebanon, 50% of the population were Christians until 1946. Today, it's less than 30%, and probably even less than that. In Iraq, 800,000 Chaldeans and Christians. Now it's 150 or less. In Turkey, 2 million Christians lived there until about 1918. Remember, Turkey was, Constantinople was the capital of the Byzantine Empire. A lot of Christians lived there. Syria also, less than 4% today Christians. In Jordan, 2%. Churches are being attacked by Muslims in the Middle East, all over the place. This is an example, you might remember from 2002, the famous takeover of the Bethlehem of the Church of the Nativity. Horrible, when these terrorists came in there. Israel was chasing them. They took refuge in sanctity in there, and they burned and destroyed the place for over 30 days until they finally, a deal was made that Israel did not go in there because they respected the place. And yet, when they went in there afterwards, the place was destroyed, burned, and hardly heard boo from the media. Carnage just goes on all over the place. Iraq, Egypt. It's not news. It just doesn't seem to make the news. There are responsible Christians out there, and we have been partnering with them. Look, we have to remember, ladies and gentlemen, that we are in this country, the Jewish population is 2% or less of the electorate of this country. If we don't partner with people who love Israel, be they Christians or Christian evangelicals, we're going to be in deep trouble. And many of these people are our friends. And you don't have to get into religious discussions with them. Many of my progressive liberal friends say, oh, you can't talk to these people because they just want to bring the Jews and gather the Jews and convert us all. I've said to some of them, and I've heard this little story, if Mashiach comes, the Messiah comes, he's either going to say one or two things. Hi, how you doing? Or nice to see you again. I think, we think it's going to be, well, actually, we don't know what it's going to be. We believe deep down it's going to be the first time, but you know what? You don't have to get into a discussion with people about that. But they love Israel. They believe in the Torah. They believe that God gave and assigned the land as an eternal covenant to the Jewish people. We should believe that too. This is our homeland. So some of the groups that we've partnered with and spoken with are Friends of Israel Gospel Ministries. They're based in Deptford, New Jersey. Kufi, Christians United for Israel. This is a phenomenal group. They consider themselves actually the largest pro-Israel organization in the world. They have 1 million members. And they've only been around, less than 20 years. We've been around a lot longer as Jews, and we don't have the numbers. We need these people. Not all Christians, unfortunately, are on our side.